what China is, what China thinks, and what China wants?
I think their strategic patience and strategic wisdom and their philosophy of Confucianism and Taoism and all will really not allow them to be aggressive. They really have never been aggressive.
If China believes that its strategic policy, its foreign policy of an inclusive, participatory growth model for the world, and particularly for the developing world, is superior than the West, then why, as a rising great power, it is not exporting its political system?
The Chinese and the Soviets, they parted ways in 1954 because the Soviet leadership once told Chairman Mao that we need to bring more communism to China. And he said no.
China believes that the system that they have evolved suits them. But that does not mean this system is also ideal for exporting and for everybody else. So this is the difference between the Western philosophy.
The Western philosophy, the Soviet philosophy, and the Chinese.
Another allegation which is leveled by the Western leadership against China in an attempt to dissuade developing countries from becoming economically dependent with China is that it's actually a debt trap. What's your take on that?
The Chinese have not given you any loans. The Chinese believe in not giving you fish, but teaching you how to fish. Indo-Pacific strategy of the Americans is to bring the conflict here. So then naturally we become very important. So in order to hurt China, if you hurt Pakistan, it hurts China also.
Viewers, very warm welcome for another episode of V News English program Perspectives. Today what we are going to discuss is perhaps one of the most interesting subject in international politics, the emergence of China on the world stage. But this emergence of China is invoking diverse reactions from different parts of the world. The West seems concerned, but the developing world has a lot of hopes and expectations. In order to better understand the Chinese strategic culture and what are the realistic expectations and concerns, we are joined today by one of the most distinguished diplomats of Pakistani Foreign Service, Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi. Ambassador Sahiba, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Ambassador Sahiba has served in China for 2 stints, first from 2003 to 2008, and secondly, returning to Beijing to head our mission in Beijing in 2019. She has served with distinction in our foreign service for almost 37 years. So I think we are very lucky, Ambassador Sahiba, for joining us today, for helping us understand what China is, what China thinks, and what China wants. So to begin with, perhaps you can share what are the key characteristics and features of the Chinese political culture?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important and a very key point to understand where China is coming from. Because unless you know the civilization and historical context and the psychological and philosophical context of a nation, it's very difficult to really make sense of what they're doing, where they're going, and why they're going where they're going. So if you want to know about the strategic culture of or thinking of China, you have to understand that this is a nation that has continuously survived for over 10,000 years, and China has been the Middle Kingdom for 5,000 years. So it's not really a young state, it's a civilizational state. And it's not only a civilizational state. I would go to the extent of saying that it also has very strong moral and philosophical moorings. So their thinking, their actions are rooted very deep into their system of governance, into their worldview, so to say. So, and if you have a very quick look at their history, then you would realize that despite being the most innovative country in the world, despite being culturally extremely diverse, and at that time, going into connectivity through the ancient Silk Route, reaching out to distant parts of the world for trade, not for colonization, not for plundering, but for trade. And this is a country that at one time had the largest naval fleet in the world. And in the 1400s, they say that Chen He, which was their very famous general, had actually almost discovered Australia and America, but they were called back when the empires changed. So in their history, you see that this is a nation that believes in defense, and it believes in consolidating the power base that they have and maintaining their territorial integrity. That is why in history you have never seen China colonize any nation. You have never seen China go beyond its borders to fight a war. Even the Great Wall was actually built to defend China against the Mongol hordes. So this is its worldview is that of cooperation, doing trade and mutually beneficial activity, and of defense and not offense. And the fundamental feature of their governance actually is the welfare of the common man.
So if
Which is very important to understand.
So if I were to raise a question, when the Western leading strategic thinkers express suspicions or concerns at the rise of China, when you read books like Thucydides' Trap, yes, they argue that China is peaceful because it needs the world. But once it acquires power, its behavior will change, as has been the case with a lot of Western powers. Is this a correct concern, or do you think, as you've so far argued, their unique strategic culture will manifest itself differently?
Look, it's very difficult to say with certainty how anybody would behave, once they really acquire that kind of power. But if you look at the historical record, they were center of the world at one time, and but they still never went beyond. They had the capacity and they didn't go beyond their borders. So if you want to judge them from what their history has been, then and you take their statements at face value, and match it, of course, with their philosophy and history and their actions in the world even now, then you see that they argue against that. Because China, as I said, still is basically wants a multilateral world. It wants multilateralism and peace and dialogue to basically be the center stage of things and not war. And that is why you see, even if you take in this particular century, it only got its independence, or not, we shouldn't say independence, it was always independent, but the new establishment of the new political dispensation in 49. So it's only been 73 years or so. But in those 73 years, they have basically focused on the development and internal security of China, rather than showing adventurism abroad. So I think their strategic patience and strategic wisdom, and their philosophy of Confucianism and Taoism and all will really not allow them to be aggressive. They really have never been aggressive.
Okay, so that's the, sort of their strategic character, if one were to use this word. But the reality right now, which we are witnessing, is a very heavy rearmament in the West and convergence and concentration of Western hard power as part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. But when you look at the military buildup in China, it is contrasted by an absence of a similar military alliance. While the US is building new allies and new partnerships with Japan, with India, with South Korea, with Australia, although China, as you rightly say, has peaceful ambitions and intentions, but in order to ensure balance of power, how will China balance this changing balance of power in Asia Pacific on its own?
I think that's a very, very good question that you have posed. And the answer again lies in their character. Because their political philosophy is that no nation can be strong unless the last person in the smallest village of China is not educated, healthy, and has a dream for the future, and is sort of confident in the government that's leading them to prosperity. And their entire political system is based on that. It is probably one of the most devolved systems of the world. And so for them, it is their development and internal security and harmony that is a guarantor of peace. But having said that, you would recall that since 2007, when their sort of second white paper on their armed forces came out, they have actually changed the entire concept of how, a conventional war is fought. So they have almost caught up with the West as far as their military strength is confined. Instead of having millions of soldiers, they have what they call now a lean and mean and a smart armed forces, very strategically sort of divided. And then because of their advancement in technology, they've got an edge on United States as far as AI and 5G is concerned. And as the time goes by, their research and development is getting so much budget, which is actually 6 times more than what America is putting in its research and development. And that is where the West got its edge. But now China has surpassed them. So technology is increasing. And this entire confrontation, this atmosphere of confrontation, this entire worry of the West does not come from the, from what they think might be the aggressive intentions of China, but from the lead that they have taken in science and technology and in artificial intelligence, with the result that, now nuclear war is already redundant. Nuclear weapons served the world well for a certain period of time. But the time for their utility is now over. Now it is more robotics, more IE, in which China has an edge. The Western powers, particularly America, still has about 4 to 5 years to catch up. And that is something that really worries the Chinese. And because, let me just make one more sentence. And there is a basic difference between the Western philosophy and the Chinese philosophy.
What is the key difference?
The key difference is that the West has always thought in terms of winning and losing. For them, you either win or lose.
It's a zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game. For the Chinese, it's never about winning or losing. And that is what they keep telling the world.
Why it is not about winning or losing?
No, it is about a peaceful growth, because they feel that the world is short enough, small enough, but it's also big enough to accommodate various powers that can cooperate together. And, their catch buzzword is the win-win cooperation, and can still work together and make the people economically and culturally and academically rich and survive. So why does there has to be a competition, but it should be friendly and peaceful competition, but not confrontation, and not to be viewed from the angle of winning and losing. Why can't you be successful and why can't I be successful? And we can both join hands to take the rest of the world forward.
So let's move towards another aspect which you mentioned of a Chinese strategic behavior and statecraft. Henry Kissinger, in its book Defense Policy, argued that, and he wrote an excellent book on China, that the reason the US promotes democracy and Western liberal system is because it believes that similar social and political systems produce similar policies and similar strategic behaviors. So if China believes that its strategic policy, its foreign policy of an inclusive, participatory growth model for the world, and particularly for the developing world, is superior than the West, then why, as a rising great power, it is not exporting its political system?
You have to understand that there's a very basic difference between the West and the former Soviet Union, which was a communist power, and the Chinese, which we believe is a communist power. Yes. And there's a fundamental difference. The West believes that democracy is the best form of government, and everybody should be democratic, and it's a one size fit all, which is actually not true, because democracy is a project that's still in the making. It's not a complete product, because democracy started with nations, small city-states, where people would, put up their hands to vote. And
it was interrupted by the Roman Empire as well.
Exactly. And then if you look at the British democracy, it's different. You look at the American democracy, it's all about lobbies. It's all about, a lot of money changing hands. So you can argue that it's hardly
more corporate democracy.
We have a different kind of democracy. Look what's happening in India. They have a different kind of democracy. So there are various forms of democracy, but they believe that this is the only form that all countries of the world should follow. If they don't follow, they're barbarians and they don't know. They're not civilized. The same was the mindset and problem of the Soviet Union. They believed that communism should have that one size fit all, and there should be a central communist party, international, and they should export this system and force other countries also to follow it. And because they thought it was the best system. And that is why the Chinese and the Soviets, they parted ways in 1954. Because the Soviet leadership once told Chairman Mao that we need to bring more communism to China. And he said no.
But by more communism, what did he mean?
What he meant was that they should be more like the Soviets and, export it abroad and get into the countries.
So the political system should be exported.
Political system, ideology should be exported, and it should be the entire world should be one communist party led by the Soviets. Now, the Chinese at that time said, we do not have to bring more communism to China. We have to bring more China to communism. What he meant is, I would say, the start of this philosophy of Chinese communism, socialism. Yes. They don't call it communism. Chinese socialism, socialism with Chinese characteristics.
But how did they marry socialism with capitalism?
I will tell you. You see, very early, they had realized that if they have to develop, they will have to lessen the state control, because they saw what was happening in the Soviet Union. So very not speedy opening up like the Russians did, which sort of absolutely
not perestroika,
devastated. No glasnost, no perestroika, nothing. But slowly and gradually making changes that relate to the history, culture, and the orientation and behavior and thinking and requirements of your own population. So you have to have a political system which best suits your own requirements in view of your history, culture, the state of your people, the state of your development, the state of your resources. So you have to have a political system that best. That is why China has never ever asked any of its partners to have a political system their own, because they said we have formed a political system, which is those who do not know China and those who have not served here do not believe that it is the most devolved system in the world.
So what you are saying makes me understand that China believes that the system that they have evolved suits them. But that does not mean this system is also ideal for exporting and for everybody else. So this is the difference between the Western philosophy.
The Western philosophy, the Soviet philosophy, and the Chinese.
Even in the political domain, the West believes that it's either democracy, liberal society, and capitalism, or everything else.
Yeah.
But in case of China, they have, as you pointed out, successfully married socialism with capitalism based on their own culture, their own history. But they do not expect a similar political system to be developed by other countries.
They always say you should choose a political system which is best suited to you and your requirements of development and peace and internal stability and everything else. That is why they never comment on your political systems. Whether you have dictatorship, you have democracy, you have whatever. They say the only thing that the Chinese always say is the lesson that they have learned, during their development. And that lesson is that economic development and security abroad and your security of your territorial security and your internal security and peaceful foreign policy can only be conducted when there is stability at home. So you need to focus on political stability, whatever your system is. So if you have political stability, that lead to economic growth. And economic growth is then the ultimate security for your territorial integrity also and for your internal security as well.
When you mention economic security, another allegation which is leveled by the Western leadership against China in an attempt to dissuade developing countries from becoming economically dependent with China is that it's actually a debt trap. What's your take on that?
Look, I have a slightly different view because I have been following this for the last, over 20 years now. And have closely interacted with the Chinese and with the rest of the world as well, particularly the Western powers, because more than half of my service spent in Europe, so more than the time that I've spent in China. I don't really agree with it because, look, what is the Western model? You went and you colonized, you plundered the rest of the world. So all these buildings, all this civilization has come by plundering the established civilization and taking their wealth, and even that was not enough. So once decolonization happened, you had neocolonialism. So you left those countries, but they're still in your trap because your multinationals own all the, like I'll give you a very small example. Mali has 800 or 8,000 gold mines, okay? It doesn't have 1 ounce of gold in its reserve. And the largest gold reserve in the world is with which country? It is with France. So what are we talking about? Look at Angola. All the diamonds are coming from there, but all the profits are going to the multinationals.
So
Look at Nigeria.
I want you to build your argument further and explain how, for a Pakistani or for any developing country in Africa, Middle East, or South Asia, how that person should look at the contrasting models of Western foreign direct investment and its impact on your society, economy, upward mobility, as compared to the Chinese model. How are they different?
Look,
is CPEC a different model from what the foreign investment from the West could offer or has offered? And if so, how so?
Now, this is sort of a lot of things and a lot of history mixed in one.
Yes.
I will try and answer it as simply as I can. Otherwise, you can have a whole day discussion on this. Look, the direct Western investment that we are talking about came to Pakistan till the 60s. Because Pakistan was being viewed as the most important South Asian nation that was going to be the next Singapore of South Asia, and was the largest Muslim country and the third largest Muslim state of the world. Okay? So it served. But what has happened since 79? What direct foreign investment has come here? Any money that has come here is either to fight jihad or to war on terrorism or whatever, and all the Western powers have stayed away from. What foreign investment has come from there? None. Nobody is ready to invest in Pakistan. So the Chinese model is a little different. They do direct foreign investment and take all the money out, okay? The Chinese model is different from the fact that they are not giving you the money. They are basically not giving you loans. You know, the people generally say the Chinese loans. The Chinese have not given you any loans. The Chinese believe in not giving you fish, but teaching you how to fish.
So explain what is CPEC. Is
like,
CPEC
for example,
debt or investment?
What is CPEC? The concept of connectivity is much older. It started by when we made the Karakoram highway, because naturally we were trying to connect it. So the concept of connectivity, the political side of it is very different. The financial package came in 2015. It came 13, first the Prime Minister came and then the President came and they signed the financial package, which had been in the making for a long time. First, the Chinese didn't have enough money to, go further and do the connectivity and the Gwadar port and all. Once they had substantial amount, we had too much terrorism. So once all that settled down, Chinese came and signed this finance. So what CPEC is actually the financial agreement of investment into these projects, which is basically infrastructure and energy and industrial zones and so on and so forth. So now what is this? This is an allocation of an amount which the Chinese have made. They say we have sort of earmarked this amount for these projects in Pakistan. But that money would be given to Chinese companies to bid for projects in Pakistan. So it is basically a seller's credit to the Chinese companies. So they gave the money to the Chinese companies who bid. We selected whoever had the best bid from among those Chinese companies. Nobody else was in any case coming. And we gave them the bids. They made the projects. Now, when we were going, for example, for the energy projects, because that is one of the most controversial that is nowadays, which has been made controversial. It wasn't controversial. Unfortunate. They asked us, what do you want to proceed? They said, we don't have energy, rightly so. Because without energy, you can't have industry. You can't have anything for that matter. So they said, okay, on what terms? We said the terms on which we already have the other, PPIs or whatever. Then we calculated how much, energy we would need after 10 years when these projects are completed. And we gave it to them, says that we want this much megawatt installed capacity. So they made those projects and did the installed capacity. Well, what happened? Alongside this, there were 2 or 3 things that were supposed to happen. First, the reconstructed economic zones were supposed to be built by the Americans in the FATA area, former FATA area, which never happened. Then we were supposed to build the special economic zones, which for the last 4-5 years were dead, and its work has only now restarted. So we thought that the economic zones would be ready, and all the investment incentives and the bijli, pani, water, gas, and other facilities would be available, and the Chinese companies would come and plug and play. But that, unfortunately, we were not able to deliver. So now you don't have the reconstruction economic zones. Your SEZs are not operational at the moment. Your investors, because of your own political instability leading to economic instability, have fled. There's really no internal investment that we are seeing. There is no foreign investment that is actually coming. Your interest rates in the banks are above 12, 13, 20% now. So why would any investor borrow at that rate when it sees there doesn't seem to be any return at the moment? And in those circumstances, the Chinese investors came, the Chinese companies came, and they put this project. Now, if we had done all this, and we had done another thing, which now the Chinese again are doing it, which we should have done it, is, putting the link lines, the distribution lines, yes, and putting the electricity infrastructure, yes, in the villages and everything. So none of that happened. We were not able to stop theft. We were not able to stop pilferage. So what has happened? The electricity is being produced. There's nobody to utilize it.
So you're saying it takes 2 to tango?
It takes 2 to tango, with the result now those Chinese, the debt is mounting up on those Chinese companies. Now, if all that had happened, the Chinese companies who have put on these power projects, they would be making money. There would be no issue. So if you haven't done your part of the work, or the other governments that had promised you things that they would do, you haven't done, the economic activity hasn't really kicked off in full stream. It is only now that we are beginning to see some forward movement on that. So naturally, there's surplus energy. So unfortunately, sometimes you plan things in a certain way, but many unseen hurdles come, and they result into and that is what has resulted in pile-up of these
my last question, ma'am, is that...
But let me answer this, sure, with one more sentence, that the same thing is happening in Africa. But in Africa, they're delivering. Right now, look where the economy of the Africans are going. You go to Rwanda, which was completely destroyed, and Kigali is better than New York today. Look at Ethiopia and Tanzania. They are one of the fastest growing. Even Nigeria is now becoming economically very important. And look at Kenya. Kenya is another big success story. China has gone and invested in these countries, in railways and roads, and in their agriculture. With the result, poverty is reducing there, because those people are eager to work hard. They're eager to get out of poverty, and their governments are serious about doing their part of the job. Again, it takes 2 to tango. So unfortunately, a lot of fault lies with us also.
So my last question, ma'am, is that specifically, what would you advise Pakistan's leadership in terms of sustainable and specific tangible measures that they need to do in Pakistan's own interest, but also to retain and improve Chinese confidence in Pakistan's ability to deliver and perform its side of the bargain?
Look, there are 2 aspects to it. Firstly, because of this flux in the world, and because of this competition, this part of the world has become very important. Strategically, there's no doubt that Pakistan is a very important factor, particularly when it comes to the containment of China. And so Balochistan becomes very important. So strategically, this is very important, and therefore there's the interference from India, from other, undesirable, activities which are conducted by third countries in Balochistan, in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and sometimes in the other provinces as well, is basically to, delay this project from completion, because CPAC is not only, we should say it out very openly, that's not only an economic project, it's a strategic project also, because it gives China absolutely shortest direct link to the Indian Ocean. And if, according to the so-called infamous Indo-Pacific strategy of the Americans, is to bring the conflict here, so then naturally we become very important. So in order to hurt China, if you hurt Pakistan, it hurts China also. So that's one aspect.
But do the Chinese raise this in their bilateral meeting with India as well?
And the second thing is that, what was your question? I forgot half of it.
No, I was asking that, how we can, what we need to do in order to address the Chinese concerns.
That is one thing. So because of that, there are now, issues of terrorism and people killing Chinese workers and teachers and all here. Now, China is not only working in Pakistan, it is working in 150 countries. Yes. It has projects all over the world. Not a single Chinese dies anywhere or gets killed. It's only in Pakistan. Why?
So there is a method to the madness?
There is method to the madness, and the Chinese totally understand.
Okay.
It is not that they don't understand. But you also have to understand, we don't have time, you also have to understand that this is not the China of the 1950s and 60s. China is a very different, very open country now. Their think tanks question, their newspapers question, their own people question that nobody kills Chinese abroad. And our best friend, strategically the most important partner that we have, if Chinese go there, we get coffins back. Why? So naturally, the Chinese government has to take into consideration that. But despite that, their companies come. Their companies come. So we should respect that. Nobody else is coming. Only the Chinese are coming. We should respect that. Secondly, in order to move forward, I think the first thing that we need to do, and to sort of also counter the negativity and the interference of the third parties trying to derail CPAC, is to ensure that the culprits who are arrested are brought to justice, and speedy justice, so that the government can tell its people that the people have been apprehended, and these are the punishments that have been meted out to them. No one has ever been punished. So we need to do that to restore confidence. Secondly, we need to change our entire culture of doing business with other countries, including with China. The kind of massive bureaucracy that we have, and at every step people trying to, create hurdles rather than the ease of doing business, it really puts people off. So, like for example, you go to Vietnam, a totally destroyed country which has, now reestablished itself. It only takes 36 hours to start a business. Running. Everything will be done one window. You go to Cambodia. You go to even the African countries, 48 hours, 56 hours, they open businesses for you. Here, it takes months and years before you can realize an investment that you're, bringing in. So we need to change this mindset. We need to, at some level, understand things have gone really rock bottom and they can't go further down. So we need to bring that concept of, excellence back into our bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy was very good. People used to admire Pakistani bureaucracy in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. We need to bring those standards back home. We need to depoliticize our, governance institutions and let them work and respect them and trust them with what they are supposed to do, rather than making them into their personal political, agents. So that massive reform of the bureaucracy is required, and it will not start from bureaucracy. It will start from they say fish starts rotting from the head. So nations also start rotting from the head. We need to bring back that concept of excellence in every aspect of our life. Whether it is political, whether it is, generalism, whether it's administration, whether it's tax collection, whether it's education, or whether it's your, social structures, we need a massive revamp. Frankly speaking, I'm generally not that negative, but to be honest, I think we are in a societal collapse in free fall. Because more than half of your school-going children are out of school. Look at the status of our workforce. We are not training them. We don't, and that is why you have falling remittances. You have people don't want unskilled labor abroad. Those times have gone. Your education system hasn't changed. You haven't aligned it with industry at all. So we need to actually shake up this entire system from the very roots. That's the only way that we can move forward, and people will start respecting us. And that will only come from enabled and smart, charismatic leadership. Bold, strong, smart, charismatic leadership. Without that, nations don't rise.
Ambassador Dagmana Hashmi, thank you so much for joining us today, and a very candid, insightful perspective, which I think will help our viewers understand China much better. And thank you also for a very frank talk that in order to better benefit from the Chinese investment and incentives, we need to put our own house in order to optimally convert that investment into improved quality of life of our people, but also greater respect and trust of the international community. Thank you so much for joining us.